Theo is 33 years old, and for the first time in 11 years, he is not behind. Not technically, anyway. The credit card balance is gone. The one that sat at $7,400 for so long, it started to feel permanent, like a filing cabinet or a water heater, just a fixture of the apartment. He paid it off on a Wednesday in March, logged in, entered the number, confirmed the transfer, watched the balance read zero. Then he closed the laptop and made a sandwich and stood at the kitchen counter eating it. There was no ceremony. No particular feeling of arrival, just the sandwich and the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the faint awareness that something had shifted, but not in the direction he had always assumed it would. That was 8 months ago. The shift he expected was relief. What he got instead was something harder to name. A kind of ambient unease where the anxiety used to be. Like a tooth that's been aching so long your jaw adjusts around it. And then one day the dentist takes it out, and your whole mouth feels wrong for weeks. The ache is gone, but the space where it lived keeps calling your attention. You keep pressing your tongue against it. You keep waiting for the pain to come back. When it doesn't, you don't feel better. You feel unmoored. Here's what Theo's financial life looked like for most of his 20s. Monthly take home around $2,600. Rent was $940 on a one-bedroom he shared utilities with a neighbor through an informal arrangement that saved him roughly $70 a month. Student loans at $287. Car insurance $118. Phone $62. Groceries budgeted at $200, but usually landing closer to $260. The math never quite worked. There was always a gap, small enough to manage, large enough to notice, wide enough to sit in the back of every minor decision. Do you get the oil changed now, or push it 2 more weeks? Do you go to the wedding in Denver, or send a card and a gift card and a text that says you're sorry you can't make it? The gap became a kind of background frequency, constant, familiar, present in every room. You live inside a gap long enough, and your nervous system starts to treat it as baseline. This is the thing nobody mentions when they talk about financial stress. They talk about the hardship, the difficulty, the weight of it. What they don't mention is that the weight also becomes load-bearing. It holds something up, some version of your identity that knows exactly who it is because the problem is always right there, always visible, always defining the edges of what's possible and what isn't. Theo gets a promotion at 31, senior analyst, $18,000 more per year. He does the math the same night in a notes app on his phone. After taxes, that's roughly $1,050 a month. He adds that to his current picture. For the first time, the math works with room left over. He stares at it for a while. Then he puts the phone down and watches television and goes to bed. He doesn't feel the thing he expected to feel. He expects to feel free. He feels suspicious instead. There's a psychological term for what happens when your baseline circumstances improve, but your emotional state doesn't follow. Hedonic adaptation. The rough idea is that people return to a relatively stable emotional set point regardless of what changes in their external situation. The income goes up, the debt goes down. The brain adjusts. The new level becomes the new normal, and you look up 6 months later, and the relief has already been filed away somewhere, unremarkable, replaced by whatever the next layer of low-grade worry happens to be. Most people assume this is about chasing pleasure, wanting more. The treadmill running faster than the person on it. But Theo's version isn't quite that. He isn't spending more. He isn't lifestyle creeping toward a new ceiling. He is saving. He is paying things down. He is doing exactly what the discipline requires, and he still feels like something is missing. The research on hedonic adaptation suggests that people are remarkably efficient at adjusting to new circumstances. A study done in the 1970s on lottery winners found that within a year, their reported happiness levels returned to baseline despite sudden windfalls. The reverse is also true. People who experience financial hardship adjust to their new lower level within a relatively predictable time frame. The emotion fades. The circumstance becomes normal. What Theo is discovering is that his baseline was built on difficulty, and now that the difficulty is actually diminishing, his nervous system is essentially waiting for the other shoe to drop. It doesn't believe the change is real. It's treating the improvement like a temporary reprieve, rather than a genuine shift in circumstance. The caution, the suspicion, the low-grade dread. These aren't character flaws. They're the byproduct of a decade spent in financial precariousness. His body learned to expect crisis, and bodies are slow to unlearn what they've been thoroughly trained to fear. What's missing is the problem. That's the part that takes a long time to understand. His friend Darnell gets into it with him once over drinks. Darnell is 36 and owns a small landscaping operation. Runs 6 crews, net income last year somewhere around $140,000. He is not a sympathetic listener on the topic of financial anxiety. He tells Theo that what he is describing is a luxury problem, which isn't wrong, but it also isn't quite the point. Theo isn't complaining. He isn't ungrateful. He is trying to describe a specific interior experience that doesn't have a clean vocabulary yet. The feeling of being financially healthier and somehow less like yourself. The version of yourself that existed inside the gap had a clarity to it. Every decision was filtered through a single question. Can you actually afford this or not? That question organized everything. It made choices simple. Not because the choices were easy, but because the constraint removed ambiguity. When the constraint loosens, the ambiguity floods back in. Now the question is not, can you afford this? The question is whether you should, whether you deserve to, whether spending money on something enjoyable is a reasonable reward or a small betrayal of the discipline that got you here. These are much harder questions than the original one. They don't have obvious answers. Theo's mother grew up without much. Her version of financial caution was never really about strategy. It was closer to a reflex. You don't spend money you haven't already spent twice in your head. You don't buy the thing that isn't necessary. You don't treat yourself without a specific reason that can be justified to an imaginary skeptic. She passed this to him not as advice but as atmosphere. It was just the texture of how money worked in their house. By the time he's 34 and the credit card is gone and the savings account has $11,000 in it for the first time in his adult life, those reflexes are still fully operational. The circumstances changed. The wiring didn't. He remembers being 8 years old, maybe 9, and asking his mother if they could go to a particular restaurant for his birthday. Not an expensive place, a casual Italian place where his friend's family had taken him the year before. He remembers her expression, the way her mouth tightened slightly, the pause before she said they would make his favorite dinner at home instead. Nobody was hungry. It was just that the restaurant was unnecessary when food was already in the cabinet. The lesson embedded itself without language. Necessity was the permission structure for spending. Desire wasn't enough. Want wasn't enough. You needed a specific reason that could withstand scrutiny. He carried this forward unchanged into adulthood. At 34, with $11,000 in savings and a zero credit card balance, his mother's voice still controlled the internal logic of his spending. The voice never asked whether he could afford something. It asked whether he deserved it. It asked whether the need was genuine or manufactured. It made every purchase a small moral decision. By the time his financial circumstances actually improved, the infrastructure of scarcity was so thoroughly embedded that improvement alone couldn't dismantle it. He goes to buy a new winter coat in November. His old one has a broken zipper pull and a lining that's been deteriorating for 2 years. A reasonable replacement runs somewhere between $90 and $160. He has $11,000 in savings. He stands in the store for 20 minutes, picks up 3 different coats, reads the tags, puts them back, leaves without buying anything, walks to the parking lot, sits in his car, and tries to figure out what just happened. He isn't broke. He isn't even close to broke. He just can't make himself spend $130 on a coat without it feeling like a violation of something he can't fully identify. That feeling is the old identity protecting itself. It knows how to operate under pressure. Under pressure, it is useful. It is disciplined, careful, effective. Without the pressure, it doesn't know what it's doing. And so it manufactures a version of the pressure anyway, out of habit, out of familiarity, out of the deep muscle memory of being someone for whom money is always a source of tension rather than a neutral resource. There's a specific moment Theo describes, and it is small enough that it probably shouldn't carry the weight it does. He's looking at his bank account on a Thursday evening. Nothing is late. Nothing is due. The checking account shows $3,200. The savings shows $11,000. The credit card shows 0. He closes the app, opens it again, closes it again. The numbers are the same. They'll be the same tomorrow. They'll probably be incrementally larger next month. And he sits there on the couch in a quiet apartment with a completely manageable financial picture, feeling something very close to grief. Not grief for a person. Grief for a problem. The problem had been his companion for a decade. Not a welcome one, but constant. It called for his attention every single month. It required his ingenuity, his restraint, his calculations. It gave his discipline somewhere to go. The $7,400 on the credit card wasn't just debt. It was, without his consciously choosing it to be, a source of identity. It defined him as someone in a particular kind of struggle, someone who understood money the hard way, someone whose relationship to financial reality was immediate and unmediated and real. Paying it off was an achievement. It was also, quietly, a kind of amputation. The comparison trap makes this harder. His coworker Lindsay is 32 and just bought a house. Not a small house, a 4-bedroom in a neighborhood where the median sale price last year was $420,000. Her down payment was a gift from her parents. She does not discuss this part loudly. What she does discuss is the house, the renovation plans, the new furniture, the guest room, the backyard. Theo watches this from a reasonable financial distance and feels something that takes a week to identify. Not envy, exactly. Something more like displacement. He's doing the right thing, the disciplined thing, the slow and unglamorous thing that actually compounds over time. And nobody is talking about it the way they talk about Lindsay's house. Nobody celebrates the zero. That's the other thing. You knock out $7,400 in credit card debt, and the world does not adjust to acknowledge it. The world adjusted, briefly and loudly, when Lindsay closed on the house. There are specific social rituals for visible acquisition: a house, a car, an engagement, a vacation with photos. There are no rituals for the quietly eliminated debt. No rituals for the savings account that finally cleared 5 figures. No rituals for the promotion that you used to pay down a balance instead of update your wardrobe. You do the work in the dark, and you are the only one in the room when the number changes. What Theo is learning, slowly and not without resistance, is that the discomfort isn't a sign that something is wrong. It's a sign that something is changing. The identity built inside a decade of financial pressure was real. It was adaptive. It served a genuine purpose for a long time. But the purpose has shifted, and the identity hasn't caught up yet. And the lag between those two things is where all the strangeness lives. He goes back to the store and buys the coat. $138, with tax. He wears it home and doesn't feel guilty. Not entirely. He stands in it in his apartment for a minute before hanging it up. It zips cleanly. The lining is intact. It will be fine for several winters at least. He did the math on it, out of habit, and the math said it was fine. What he is working on, slowly, is getting his gut to agree with the math. Getting the old reflexes to recognize that the threat they were trained for has genuinely, materially, measurably receded. Not because things are perfect, not because the future is guaranteed, but because $138 for a coat, when the savings account says $11,000 and the credit card says zero, is actually just $138 for a coat. The financial stress doesn't vanish all at once. It recedes in patches, unevenly, leaving behind residue. A hesitation before a restaurant meal, a reflexive calculation in the grocery store that he no longer strictly needs to make, a background monitoring of the checking balance that runs quietly even on good weeks. These aren't bad habits exactly. They are the leftover infrastructure of a system that was built for a harder environment. They kept him solvent for a decade. They paid off the card. They built the $11,000. They are still running, still useful, still very much part of who he is, just operating now in a landscape that no longer requires full deployment. Theo's therapist, a soft-spoken woman named Renata who charges $140 a session and has heard a great many things, tells him that the grief is real and the grief is appropriate, that it is possible to mourn a version of yourself that was shaped by difficulty without wishing the difficulty back, that the identity formed inside scarcity doesn't have to be discarded when the scarcity eases. It can be carried forward as a kind of fluency, a deep literacy about money and constraint and survival that most people never have to develop, and that is, for all the cost of acquiring it, genuinely worth something. Theo writes this down in a notebook, reads it a few times over the following weeks, starts to believe it, gradually, in the way you believe things that are true before they feel true.